stressful because now when I'm hanging out with family, I'm like thinking about work. Like my mind is just in overdrive. It's just thinking. I can't enjoy my time with family. I just gotta get through this, man. The work is already there. My family's already here. I don't have time to think. Like I have to do. I know this won't be pretty. I know this won't be perfect. It doesn't absolve my responsibility to my clients and also my responsibility to my family.
To the Rendered Hope podcast. I am your host, Philip Carroll, with another episode. Look, we've taken 2 weeks off. I have a wonderful and exciting list of guests coming up in the near future. And without further ado, I just want to get into today's episode. Today, I am joined once again with the very first guest that we had on this podcast, Matt Kim. And we talk about business, we talk about strategy, we talk more about balance and how to maintain your emotional, mental, and even somewhat spiritual well-being while in the midst of a busy season, while in the midst of a busy schedule, and while just trying to figure out your avenue, what it's going to be that you do, how you handle those things, and how you handle these stressful situations. So again, without further ado, here's my interview with Matt Kim. So good to have you back on the show. Part of the reason why I asked you to come on here again is just kind of the flow of the episodes that we've been having and seeing the different type of people who I've had on here and also the different type of people that I know of that watch this show. A big part of what is going on culturally and in the sphere of influence that I have is really seeing people that are either working for themselves or have aspirations to do great things for themselves. And a part of why I wanted to bring you on here is just with what you do and how you carry yourself, the business acumen and even being a self-starter. I think a lot of what you have to offer and a lot of what you have to say could benefit people, especially that are on the earlier stages of business or even, those who have recently started or started a while ago, just in the realm of organization and business management on a personal level. So, before we get started in that conversation, just how have you been? How's everything been going with you?
Yeah, everything's been popping off. So I've been super busy and slammed, which is a huge blessing. And so yeah, so I've just been trying to, one foot in front of the other. I mean, things like that, I don't think it changes. Like if you're progressing, like you're always a newbie, like you're always a learner. And so I love the thrill of that. And so that's kind of been my season lately.
That's so awesome to hear. What I've realized about myself and even about other people, and I'm sure for you, and we might be rehashing some of what we talked about on the first episode we did together, but really this importance about prioritization and time management and how you choose where to put your mind, where to put your active self on a daily basis, the things that you can leave to the end. And in the past, we've done a workshop about time management and about business and about administration. But what I've come to realize, it's not about the excitement that we carry into a project. It's not about the excitement that we carry into an endeavor, but it's really those moments where nobody's watching. There's no hype, there's no excitement, there's no congratulations. And all you have is yourself to make sure that you get the job done, to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to keep the lights on, so to speak. So when it comes to you, as we get to the end of the summer, and as business will always fluctuate, how are you keeping yourself motivated? How are you keeping yourself energized for each business and workday?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I have I have something called I would call it like a rolling to-do list. And so essentially, like, I've had the same to-do list in my notes on my phone for like years and years and years. And so basically what I do is like I'll write at the top like themes for the year, and then it's not longer than one line, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. And like right under that, I write kind of like medium-sized goals that I want to accomplish like within the next like 6 months. And then underneath, and so again, that only takes up one line. So now I've used two lines, and underneath that, all on one page where I could see it is where I write like my immediate to-do list of like what I need to do today, what I need to do this week, etc. But the reason I brought that up was because, like for me, like I think it's easy to like kind of gas out and lose, the motivation when we forget why we're doing what we're doing to begin with. And we lose sight of like our goal. And, like reminding yourself and regaining focus like has to be as much of a discipline as it is, um just an ability. Like it has to become a skill. And so skills are like practiced and skills are developed. And so for me, it's like to help myself like constantly remember and stay in touch with, why I'm doing this and why it matters at all. That's kind of something that I do every day, just to, keep it like fresh and top of mind. And that helps me to, even when things get difficult or like problems arise, and luckily like things haven't gotten slow, but let's just say if things get slow, like that reminds me, man, you know what, like this is what I'm working towards and this is why it matters. And so yeah, that helps me a ton.
I think what's so amazing about being in business with yourself is this idea that you control your own workflow. You know, how busy you are, the production, the excellence, the quality of what you're doing. You know, obviously there's influence from your client, but at the same time, you know, something that I've realized about myself is sometimes I'll get into these ruts where I don't feel productive in the sense of not that I don't have things to do, but it's like I don't know how to do them in this moment, in this season. You know, where do I put again my time? And when you talk about to dos, like I know for me, when I keep my to do list and my agenda, that I struggle to really. It's like I'll put something in there, then never look at it again. But the fact that I'm writing
Mhm.
something down makes me feel accomplished, even if I never
Mhm.
get to it. So like it'll be Monday, and I'll write the same three things down for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and when it's done, it's done. But what I've
Mhm.
realized for myself when it comes to us, we tend to try to do a lot of different things at the same time. You know, whether or not there are specialty or are primary, it's like you have these side projects on the side, and these things that you wish you could do and the things that you wish you had more time to do. And it's
Mhm.
even that creative process of saying that I like to work at a certain time, I like to be in a certain atmosphere, I like to have my music going, I like to control, how much interaction I have, because there's days where I'm sure it's for you, but there's days where I work and it's like, you know, I can have someone with me and we'll talk, and we'll, we've had those days where it's like
Yeah.
do a little bit, talk a little bit, do a little bit, talk a little bit. But then there's days where like I just need to put my noise canceling headphones on. I don't want to talk to anyone. Then there's days where I just need some silence, and I might not get too much done, but it's these things that I've been putting off. And I
Mhm.
think what people need to understand is that it's okay to not always have the best day when it comes to, let's say, the grunt work, right? Because most of the work we do isn't things that people will see. They're not going to see the paperwork. They're not going to see the documentation. They're not going to see the development and the training and all of these things that go into those moments of work that people see, right?
Yeah.
Because you might spend an hour editing something, but it took you 12 years to learn how to edit it, right? And it's just that idea, and even this concept of creativity, right? How do we apply it to our work, but then how do we apply it to our lives, and how do we apply it to what we're doing for others, and how do we apply it to what we're doing for ourselves? I
Mhm.
think you're in a position where a lot of what you do professionally is also something that contributes to you personally, whether it's through your portfolio, because you're putting something out there that people have to judge, that people have to be happy with, that people have to critique. And it can be such a shot not just on your abilities, but also on your personal tastes and on your personal creativity. What are some things you would suggest or advice you would give to the creative that's stepping into this world of solo entrepreneurship, where they have to not only satisfy their own creative desires but also satisfy a client with the product that they create or distribute?
Man, yeah, that's huge. That's such an important like thing to consider. I mean, I would say to like any creative that's already, participating in the marketplace, like serving clients or are aspiring to, um, this is what I would say. It is to give yourself to the process of becoming a fully formed creative and a fully formed business person, because there's an interesting relationship, I think, especially if you're creative in the marketplace, between what you put out and how it's received. And I think a lot of times, like, in our maybe immaturities, like, we'll take everything personally, especially if you're creative, right? Because we're so, romantic and passionate, and our emotions run high and we're very dramatic. And so our highs are high and then our lows are low. But and because of that, we interpret things very personally. But the reality is, and this is what's so beautiful about the marketplace, is like, if you're not serving someone, then you won't be well received. And so just because I think I'm serving somebody doesn't mean I'm actually serving somebody, right? I don't get to decide what blesses people. They get to decide. And I get to decide if I want to serve them or not. And so if I believe that what I'm offering is serving people, then my mindset has to shift to be like, okay, like, now I'm asking the question, how do I serve you? What is the best for you? Like, how do I come alongside you and help you get to where you're going, versus this is the kind of immature mindset of a budding creative, which is, how do I self-express? How do I express myself? How do I self-actualize on someone else's dime? Right? That's a little weird. Like, that's a little inappropriate. Like, can you imagine, like, if somebody hires you to do a job to help them express their message and their mission, and then you're off doing your own little thing, like, on their dime, on their time, making art that's self-fulfilling, like that, like, you wouldn't make a dime because no one would want to work with you. But I think it's the process of every, like, creative entrepreneur to come outside of yourself, like, come outside of this ego that we've created, of like this self-image, and like understand that, oh man, like, me actually, like, becoming self-actualized isn't for its own sake, but it's actually for the sake of others. Like for me, when I'm, the most in flow and the most, like, developed and skilled and walking with wisdom as me, like, I'm actually the most equipped to bless other people, and that'll be received as such. And so, like, I think a lot of times, like, the friction we come up against as, like, creatives, is simply because, like, we haven't figured out how to, like, get outside ourselves yet. But if we could, like, really work, do that internal work, and have, like, a mature and developed product, um and we're ready to serve other people, like, we'd be surprised at how, like, fruitful we'll be, because um all of our gifts, all of our value has somewhere now to land.
It's like if you go to a restaurant and you order a steak and you say you want it medium rare, but the chef is like, you know what? I personally like my steak medium. So I'm going to give it to you medium because you're going to take it how I want it. And, something that I think people would really benefit from is to not seek the validation on behalf of your product, but seek validation from the way your product makes them feel, right?
Mm,
I think it's so hard when you're um, a market within yourself to almost challenge yourself, right? A common expression in sports is you're only as good as your last game, as your last fight, as your last
mm,
match. And I think for us, it becomes hard to understand and really grasp that it's okay to not always produce what you would consider your best work, right? Because at the end of the day, someone's paying you for a specific reason. Shifting gears from that, a lot of what we talked about on the last time you were on the show was about what creativity and what your businesses did for you, um, on a mental, like a mental and emotional standpoint. Going back to that place a little bit, and just with in mind the audience that we have, how do you get to a place of maintenance when it comes to carrying yourself and developing your brand and developing your work life balance when it comes to managing your mental health, when it comes to managing your emotional security, because we can use these things to almost mask and heal and help us, but sometimes we can work ourselves into a funk. We can work ourselves into a place where we are worse off than where we were before, and it's not intentional. It's just because we become so married to the craft. Are there any situations in your life where you had to take a step back and realize that what you were putting in and the things you were doing and the level of commitment that you had to not only the client but to the craft was becoming a burden on your mental and emotional well-being?
Yeah, no, I love that question. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I had that recently. So it's super like current. I had like a confluence of people who are important to me in my life, like come through and visit us. So I have family out here, but then I also have family other places. And so my dad, for example, he was in town visiting, and so were my cousins. And so I got family out in Germany, and so they were also visiting as well. And so it's hilarious because leave it to your clients to like just, seek you out and give you a ton of work and business right when your family comes into town. And that was basically me. And so that stretch of time was, I would say, like maybe like 2 or 3 weeks where like my family was in town, and at the same time I was just slammed with work. And I remember like going through it, like my initial instinct was, and I think this was the right instinct, which was like, I just gotta get through this, man. Like I gotta, like, the work is already there, like my family's already here. Like I don't have time to think, like I have to like do. And so for me, I'm like, kind of in a mode where like I know this won't be pretty, and I know this won't be perfect, but like like it doesn't absolve my responsibility to my clients and also my responsibility to my family. So like, as imperfect that it's going to be, I know it's gonna not gonna be perfect. I just got to do it. And so that's what I was doing. I was juggling like work. Like I would find little like 1 to 2 hour slots in between spending time with family, and I would just like grind it out, like edit, and then I'll like hang out with family. And what was interesting was like, it was stressful because now when I'm hanging out with family, I'm like thinking about work. Like my mind is just in overdrive. It's just thinking, and like I can't enjoy my time with
And you're
family.
when you're working, you're thinking about family.
Exactly, exactly. And so like normally like I would do a okay job like budgeting my energy and attention to where like I don't have that issue normally. That's not normal. But this was like an exception in my life where I'm like, oh my God, I haven't experienced this in so long. Like really this is really stressful. Um and I think in moments like that, it's always like important to like remind yourself that like there's ebbs and flows. Like there's always ebbs and flows. And so for me, it's like if I took that like 2 to 3 weeks of that dynamic and I use that to judge myself and grade myself, I don't think that would be a fair representation of me.
Right.
But I think a lot of times, like, just human nature is we have a tendency to do that. And so for me, it was like after all of it, I had to pull back and be like, that was wild, but that was an exception. And there's grace for that. Good job, like pushing through. Like for the next time, how do I make sure like things like that don't happen? Like, okay, Matt, you knew your dad was coming into town. You knew your cousins were coming into town, so maybe there would be ways in the future you could kind of adjust so that something like this doesn't happen again. And so now I'm thinking like solution oriented, but I wouldn't even be able to think solution oriented, I think, if I wasn't like gracious with myself, like recognizing that this was, you know, not this was a one off and it doesn't have to be the norm. Um so I think framing, like the way we frame things really help. Um and I will say, like, it does get. I know this is. I hope it's convincing. I hope it's convincing when I say that, like, it does get easier. Um, because I think the whole purpose of practicing something or doing things over and over again is so that it just sticks and it becomes like second nature. And so I think the hardest time is when you're first trying, when you're first stepping out to like be like, you know what, I don't like this pattern. And so let me try something different is always the hardest time. But then every time you repeat it, like you're reinforcing the change. And then it really, really does become easier. And so it's like if you could stick it out and commit to trying again and again over a long enough like time horizon, I really do believe like there's lasting change there. Because I think the reality is just because I experienced that kind of 2 to 3 week window where it was super stressful, I don't think that's like an indictment or like a diagnosis on me. Like I don't believe that in my heart at all. But there was a season where I would have because it actually
Yeah.
probably was true. Um, yeah, but like, I think in this season I know that it's not, and so it's okay to just move on.
I think it's a good litmus test because you referenced at the end of that, how you would have responded or acted in a different season. Maybe you would have gotten frustrated, maybe you would have gotten angry or depressed, or burdened to the point of wanting to just quit or lash out because them coming was on the back end of a busy conference.
Mm,
And overall, the middle of the summer is never a slow time for
yeah,
anyone, right? So it's like
yeah.
even going into that stage of having to manage your work, your life, your family, your personal time, your mental health, your other commitments, relationships. I can understand how it can become such a burden, especially being that it's such a short amount of time where there is an ending, but at the same time you have to still get this work done. Um, where I've noticed a lot of people who struggle when it comes to time management and effort, right? Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of what you're doing is you can't do too much to change your talent level. You can
Mm,
train, you can gain new skills, but you're not going to get a better sense of a vision. You're not going to always be able to improve your awareness to a thing because you are who you are, right? And people hire you for who you are. So for you to change dramatically would be almost betraying the reason why they hired you. But at the same
yeah.
time, that people are expecting the best from you given your circumstances. So for those who are listening and for those who are watching, don't be afraid to communicate. Whether it's with your client, whether it's those around you, whether you're finding creative and healthy outlets to express yourself to yourself, right? We're not talking about being self-destructive, but really finding those avenues of communication and being able to blow off some steam when you need to, or take a day off when you need to, right? Or even, hey, like I'll spend the whole day with you today, but I need all day tomorrow to work. Um, and it
Yeah.
can become so tempting to sacrifice things like sleep. It can become so tempting to sacrifice the small things in your life that you don't even recognize as necessary, right?
Yeah.
Um, you'll hear stories about how creatives will skip a shower and then they'll skip two showers and then they'll skip a meal and then they'll they won't sleep for days at a
Mhm.
time. And
Yeah.
you might feel the ability to really make up for lost time, but at the end of the day those self-destructive behaviors are really going to set you back. I know for me, whenever I go through a pit of sadness or depression and those seasons, I know that my trigger is I haven't been sleeping well. I haven't been getting my
Mm,
rest. And the things that affect me are simply because I'm tired or exhausted to that point. Um, some might turn to alcohol, some might turn to nicotine, some might turn to weed or other things, or but at the end of the day, when it comes to developing your skill set, when it comes to developing who you are as a worker, as a creative, as a person, you really can't sacrifice your basic needs or change too much of what made you successful.
mm,
And you talked about there, resisting the urge to judge yourself based on such a small sample size of performance, right?
okay.
So
Yeah.
again, getting back to that idea of betraying the reason why you were hired,
Mm,
if you choose to focus on your most recent couple of weeks, you're going to work yourself out of the job. You're going to work yourself out of the opportunity. You're going to push yourself out of the relationship.
mhm,
How
mhm,
would you say you've developed these skills when it comes to compartmentalizing and being able to recognize what's real and what's not? I'm sure there's
mhm.
been times where you were, as you referenced, in a different season, not responding in the same manner or same direction. But let's talk about recovery from those seasons, right?
Mm,
How
yeah.
do you deal with that when it comes to, like, you've already gone over the edge, you've already found yourself in a bad spot, you
Yeah.
failed to really maintain your posture of peace and balance. How do you work yourself out of that place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the hardest things for us to do, like to get like progress out of that, is actually to accept what just happened. Is to accept what just happened because I think a lot of times when we experience like things that are like that, that's hard on the heart, it's very exhausting, it's very discouraging. We almost feel like for us to fully accept it would be to crush us even more. And so we find different ways to try to like ignore it or escape it. And because we do that, we actually never go to the next step after acceptance, which is to try to figure out like what went wrong and figure out a solution. Because here's the thing, like you're not going to ask yourself what went wrong if you are lying to yourself that it didn't go wrong or you don't want to think about it. But it's in radical acceptance of what just happened where you're the most set up to now look back and figure out, okay, why did this happen? What went wrong? And those lessons actually become the very building blocks that allows you to never repeat it again and come up with a much more superior way of life. And so I think even looking back on my journey, it was the radical acceptance that I had a terrible experience with a client where I just fumbled the bag, as they would say, and just totally made a fool of myself. Like I had to accept that in order for me to learn from it. And I think a lot of times we just stunt our learning because we just don't accept it. And so even I mean to the point of like I mean, I could give an example from this like most recent example I've been sharing about, like in the kind of window of time where my family was visiting, because I was pushed to my limits. I It was actually a beautiful thing because I realized that one of my clients that I was servicing wasn't like aligned with my core values and like how I wanted to operate. But I wouldn't have figured that out unless I stress tested it with a situation wherein push comes to shove. And so because push came to shove, and for me, like every minute mattered to me in that window of time. I, I the mismatch between me and this particular client became much more evident. And so what did I do? I actually parted ways with them. I said, hey, like I want to fulfill our contract. I want to make sure you're good, set up for success. I really appreciated working with you. I think after our contract is over, like I'm not looking to renew it. Please let me know if there's anything I could do to like make the transition easier. So I had that conversation, but I would never have had that conversation like if I didn't realize like, oh man, this is actually outside of my boundary. And the only reason I knew that was because like it was actually rubbing up against other things that was important to me. And so I don't know, like I think
Especially if the money's
everything.
good.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, everything's a learning experience, you know?
Yeah. I think something that I've come to realize is when it comes to toxic clients, and even if you're a client, toxic working relationships, I think people may feel pressured, let's say it's their only client,
Mm,
pressure to stay on it. And I want to advise you that there's no better feeling than when you see and recognize a toxic working relationship and you have the opportunity to refund the deposit and move on with your life. I know I've had those moments where it's like, you know what, you know, I'm going to give you your money back. This isn't working out for either of us. And all of a sudden, you've cleared up hours out of your schedule. But my point is this: like, don't be so hasty to earn whatever dollar you can, as Matt said, to the point where you sacrifice your core values. And it's important that you have core values. You know, how do you operate? What's your character? What's your level of integrity? What kind of clientele are you looking to have? Right? Because if you're going into business, you don't want people that will reflect poorly on you, and where you know that a sour relationship will really mess things up for not only you but for your business. And I want you really to focus on one thing that Matt said, is really this idea of communicating, right? The things that are good for him, and but at the same time are serviceable to your client, because you know there's nothing more stressful than a bad review, right? Businesses are so desperate for their customers to leave them a positive review, because you know you tell one person, that person tells three people, those three people tell three more people, and it's this idea that word of mouth is really going to be what either grows or kills your business. As we begin to wind down, there's one more topic I really want to get into, and I've kind of alluded it to a degree. But for those who are new, or for those who have been going for a while, but they're struggling to really find their core audience, you know, what would you say when it comes to having confidence to stick it out and to do the work, even when they don't feel like they have the, again, core audience or clientele that they know they're good enough to have? You know, how should they carry themselves, and what are some words of encouragement you would give them?
Man, that's that's a really good that's a really good question. Um, yeah, I mean, I would encourage you with this is that the reason that it's a core value to you or it's important to you, um, I think should be enough. Like it should be enough. And what I mean is this is like I think a lot of times like it's easy to come up with the core value, right? Like there's no cost to that. All we gotta do is we sit down, maybe we have a notebook, we envision it, and we write it down. Beautiful. But I think what gives it value is actually the process and the test and the price to pay on our way to validate and actualize it. And so I would even encourage you by saying, like, it's actually really normal. Like, there would be something wrong if it wasn't hard. Like, it would be something wrong with your value if it wasn't hard. Like, it would be something wrong with, the way you view life if it was really easy. And so I would, first of all, encourage you to say, like, the fact that it's difficult means there's something worthwhile about it. And I think if we could keep that at the forefront in the difficult moments, like it'll really give us the juice to persevere. And I think something that really helped me a lot was like when I realized that, like, yeah, we could have like ideas as our core value. Like, for example, like my core value is to be healthy, or my core value is to be generous. Like, these are ideas, but what's even more powerful than that is actually people. So it's like, think about it. Like, if I'm healthy, healthy for what? Healthy for who? If I'm generous, generous to who? If I'm excellent, excellent for whom? And I've always found that like people are actually way greater motivators. Like love towards people is a way higher motivator than simply an idea. And so like if you could connect your values to the people that really matter the most to you, and that could be your family, that could be your friends, and that could extend beyond that and be your clientele. Like if you could have love for your clientele, man, like will that give you the grace to
Yeah.
persevere? Um yeah, and so I would say that, and I would also say like there's a proverbial saying, right, is to not despise small beginnings, but I would go a step further and say, then what would that look like? Like, what's the opposite of that? And I would say it's to actually appreciate small beginnings. And so I think if we could look at all the little wins, all the little like victories, all the little ways that we're actually already fulfilling our dreams a little by little. Wow, I'm already doing this. I already have a podcast, or I made one sale. That's one more than I did before. Like if I could focus on the little wins, like that'll actually encourage you. Like we gotta let it encourage us, you know. And so I would say that is like, man, let yourself be encouraged by what you're already doing, because you're actually doing better than you realize.
Wow. Yeah, and even this idea that like you shouldn't evaluate yourself based on how many customers you have, but how are you performing for the ones that you do have, right? Because I'd rather have 5 happy customers than 20 that hate the product. Um, and building brand loyalty, I think those were great points because so often we become focused on the wrong thing. We become people who expect the results of a 6 figure business when you're not even pulling in two. And that's not to say you're doing the wrong thing. It's just that you need to adjust your perspective and build the habits now that you can carry into the next phase of your business. Um, so with that being said, Matt, it's been great having you today. I don't want to give away all of our secrets so that we have more stuff to talk about in the
Yes,
future.
sir.
Do you have any closing remarks on your end before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you for having me, guys. Like, stay plugged into the Rendered Hope podcast. I mean, this is like top notch content, and yeah, I mean, I just encourage you guys to go out and get it, take the risks, and learn and grow.
And for the record, I did not ask him to say that. So go ahead and follow Matt. All of his socials and his website will be in the description. His studio's up and running. He's already had clients. So if you're in the DMV, go ahead and grab some studio time. With that being said, I hope you all have a great day. And thank you again, Matt, for coming on. And there you have it. That is my episode with Matt Kim. Thank you so much for joining me, Matt. If you want to follow him on any of his social media platforms, find his website, see what he's doing, or get involved with anything he's doing, feel free to look in the description, whether you're on Spotify or YouTube, and you can find all of his links. We will have another audio exclusive episode this Thursday as well as next Thursday. And you can find us for our next YouTube and Spotify video interview next Monday. And with that being said, this is the Rendered Hope podcast, and I hope you have a great day.